Good evening, everybody. James Hancock here, back to review episode 3 of season 3 of The Expanse, an episode called Assured Destruction, although I'd probably rename it as The Calm Before the Storm. It was a relatively quiet episode with basically a lot of maneuvering of the chess pieces on the board, but nothing seriously status quo altering or no major revelations to really sink our teeth into. I was debating whether or not to even do a video about this particular episode. However, in that I am a giant fan of The Expanse and I want the show to continue for a very long time. I feel like all fans who have blogs or YouTube channels or podcasts, whatever the case might be, that we should definitely bang the drum for the show whenever possible, even if you have an episode like this, which was really just a lot of setup for what's going to be a massive showdown. For people out there who have read Caliban's War, you are acutely aware of what is coming our way, and it's going to be absolutely massive. And I liked seeing how in this episode, it did a really good job of basically putting a lot of characters and different storylines on a collision course on Io. But before I continue with my recap, I do want to issue an official correction for my last video. As many of you rightly pointed out, I made a mistake in referring to how the speed in the previous episode was having a horrible impact on Christian, when in actuality it was the acceleration. If you're flying at a constant speed, you feel totally normal. It's when you're accelerating at 1G or more that you start to feel like your brains are being pushed to the back of your skull. And that obviously is what had such horrible side effects and consequences for Christian in the previous episode. I remember watching an interview with Neil deGrasse Tyson on the Joe Rogan Experience, and he was talking about how if you were to accelerate at 1G, without stop, that it actually wouldn't take you that long to reach the speed of light. However, the question is, how do you create a renewable fuel source that would allow you to do so? Right now, with that technology completely eludes us. In any case, I apologize for messing up the physics of the show in my previous review, but as always, I greatly appreciate the corrections from the diehard Expanse fanbase. Another quick note, though, before I dive into my recap, I've been getting a little friction or pushback from some people who say all this guy does on his channel is wave his hands around and tell us what we've already seen. And they are absolutely correct, but it's not as if I'm trying to sneak a recap in without telling anyone. I include review and recap in the title of the video, so when people watch a recap and get mad that I'm doing a recap, I can't really help them. I will, on the other hand, though, try and calm down my hands. My hands are a little spasmy, and I've been dealing with it my whole life. If you can believe me, it used to be considerably worse. I at least try now to use my hands for emphasis as opposed to just whirling them about like a madman. But what drives this episode is two separate conflicts, one on the Rocinante and one back on Earth. On Earth, we see the Secretary General and Ehrenreich having this ongoing debate about whether or not Earth should strike first against Mars while they still have a relative numerical advantage. Mars has a few early attack systems in place to launch nukes at Earth, and basically he wants to take those out and see if he can kind of get the upper hand really early. As we know, this entire war has been built on a lie, and Ehrenreich's just trying to double down on it and make sure that Mars is defeated before he's completely discovered and revealed to be who he is. But only Christian has that ability, and she, of course, is way up in the far reaches of space on the Rocinante, unable to relay the information that she has without accidentally giving away the position of the Rocinante, putting that entire ship in danger. And I have to say, what made this episode a little limp for me is that I feel like the interactions between Ehrenreich, the Secretary General, and Anna, they lack that sense of urgency and intensity that we have between our central characters on the Rocinante. Clearly, that's where the main drama is unfolding, where you've got Christian and Bobby and Holden and Naomi and Alex and Amos and Prax. That is the heart of the show right now and what they're going to do when they get to Io. I understand why we need to be fed all this information about what's going on between Earth and Mars, but too often I feel like some of their scenes are just filler, fleshing out empty space in the story, when really my emotions and my interests are much more preoccupied with what is happening on the Rocinante. But as we see, Bobby's not doing the world's greatest job of bonding with the crew. She's basically throwing her weight around, and Alex is trying to keep the peace since Alex is a fellow Martian, but Bobby's not even that keen on getting along with Alex. But Holden, in his typical fashion, basically says, look, we're going to fix your ship, and you can blast on out of here anytime you like. No one's holding you here against your will. You asked for help, and we came and helped you. I like how Holden doesn't say much, and he walks around in a pretty grim mood most of the time, but when he speaks with purpose. We get an interesting little side plot with Christian's bodyguard, Kotyar, if that's how you say his name. When he and the fellow from the yacht are about to be captured by an Earth vessel, he basically chokes the other guy out and kills him because he doesn't trust him not to unveil Christian's location. And through Kotyar's captivity, we see over the course of the episode how Admiral Wynn is basically taking control over the ship, the Agatha King, and directing it toward Io. However, there's another character, I believe his name is Admiral Southern. He does arrange for a little one-on-one conversation with Kotyar at one point, who very quickly and very succinctly says that the war is built on a lie. Don't trust Wynn. Christian is no traitor. She has not defected to Mars. And just wait and see, because all the bad guys are going to be revealed for who they are in the very near future. The other main subplot is how Jules Pierre Mao and May up on Io are starting to bond a little bit. While Jules Pierre Mao is the bankroll that is funding all this research, he sees what's happening to these kids. And while some of the kids are excited when they see how one of their playmates is able to climb walls and climb on the ceiling and how he's got all this enhanced strength and abilities, when he basically collapses and starts to spasm, the kids are terrified, but also more importantly, Jules Pierre Mao realizes no matter what his lab rats tell him, the protomolecule is wildly unstable. It's basically a ticking time bomb, and it's only a matter of time before something truly terrible occurs. But also, Jules Pierre Mao, he seems to see a little bit of his two daughters in May. So while Jules Pierre Mao is definitely one of the villains of the show, he's not completely without his redeeming qualities. Back on the Rocinante, we see that Alex has received a message from his ex-wife back on Mars, and while she's relieved to hear that he's still alive, she basically says it's too little, too late, and that their relationship is over. And while I understand what they're trying to do, I mean, if you read the books, you see that oftentimes aboard the Rocinante, Naomi, Amos, and Alex will sometimes get kind of screwed when it comes to meaningful things to do or really interesting character defining beats, and how as the series progresses, a lot of the other characters that are introduced will sometimes take center stage. But in that Alex and Amos and Naomi and Holden are the stars of the show, I see how they keep trying to find ways to keep Alex and Amos relevant. And we did get a little interesting scene between Amos and Prax where he's talking about his upbringing in Baltimore and his old life. And as I said in my previous video, if you want to get a taste of that, read the short story or the novella, The Churn. I think it's like $1 or $2 to download it online, or you might even be able to find it for free. But as somebody pointing out in the comments last time, for people out there who don't like Amos, and if you don't, I don't know why, I think Amos is a total badass, but for people who don't, you might gain a little sympathy for how he became what he has become. But the best thing in this episode is basically when Christian and Holden and everybody in the Rocinante basically put all their cards on the table about what they know. Christian talks about the Caliban program and the attempt to make these hybrids, and how Aaron Wright and Mao are basically planning on eliminating Mars entirely by unleashing the hybrids on that planet. And Holden and Amos and Prax talk about what they think is going on Io, what they know so far, and their plans to try to rescue May. And they finally realize that their interests and goals and ambitions are basically in complete alignment. While Naomi might still be pining to go off to Tycho, and Bobby just seems to be talking shit with anyone who's standing in front of her, it at least appears as if Holden and Christian have the same goals now. So my prediction at this point is that episode 5 of the season is where we're going to see a massive showdown, that in episode 4, it'll still be all about the people from Earth and the people from Mars and the Rocinante all converging on Io for this giant showdown. But I can promise you, if they even successfully adapt 10% of what was on the page successfully onto the screen, we are in for a showdown of all showdowns. So to all my fellow fans out there, I'm sorry if I wasn't able to offer more of a full-throated, enthusiastic review and recap of this evening, but while this episode definitely did a good job of getting the ball further down the field toward the goal line, it's not necessarily going to go down in history as anybody's favorite episode of The Expanse. But obviously, I remain a massive fan of the show, I remain a massive fan of this fictional universe, and I just can't wait to see how they tackle all the interesting events to come in the near future. So I hope you enjoyed my recap and review. If you would subscribe to my channel, I'll be your best friend for life. And if you want to talk more, you can find me on Twitter at Colbrax, or just leave me a comment in the comments below. And I'll be back at y'all tomorrow night to review a little micro-budget independent film called Avengers Infinity War. You might have heard of it, but I'm intensely excited. And I've basically been doing everything this week in my power to stay as busy as humanly possible so that I don't go insane anticipating that movie. But hopefully, I will have very good things to say about that movie this time tomorrow evening. But for now, I'm signing off. Onwards and upwards.